The MEC for Agriculture and Rural Development here in Gauteng, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, has halted the second phase of a farm stall project. According to a weekend report, a TimesLive report, for example, the project has run into millions during its first phase, with allegations of overpricing for converted shipping containers that were set to function as fruit and vegetable stalls. It was billed as an empowerment project, and the initiative now, though, has been scrapped. Let's talk about it with the MEC, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa. MEC, good morning to you, and thank you very much for your time. Appreciated. You're 4 months into the job, and you were responsible for putting a stop to this program. What made you suspicious?
Good morning, Iman. And you're correct in saying I came into office in July as part of the Government of Provincial Unity in Gauteng. And part of my role is, of course, to perform executive oversight in the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. This particular project is one that did present and create a bit of a red flag for me. When we started actually digging into the costing and how the project itself has been costed. What also then came to light was that some of the beneficiaries, the 16 beneficiaries who are actually supposed to be the owner operators of these farmyard stalls, wrote to me and actually reported that they have not been receiving the necessary support. Many of these container stores have actually been closed for the last few months, and overall, the project hasn't delivered what it was intended to. So there's a lot of areas of concern, and as such, like you've said, we have put a request through to suspend further funding of this project at this point in time, so that we can conduct a thorough assessment of the impact of the project, but also of the costing. And if we are going to continue, which in my opinion, the project was intended to deliver some good benefits, and it really is there to promote, township economic opportunities and entrepreneurs. And so we're still committed to that. But it has to be done in a way that, is underpinned by good governance and prudent use of public funds.
All right, so the Gauteng Department of Agriculture and Rural Development and Environment, this is GDOD, I think is the way that it's referred to, awarded this project implementation contract to a company called Farmyard. I believe this was last year, to run a market outlet program in townships across the province. But some of the spending items that Farmyard charged was for things like equipment and fittings at 1.1 million rand, 16 branded bicycles with, quote, thermo storage at a cost of 16,000 rand each, 16 sets of 3 branded T-shirts and caps at a cost of 14,000 rand per set.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds like a lot of money. Do you know why this project was awarded and whether proper vetting had actually, in fact, been done?
Well, I mean, and some of the costs that you've raised, the line items that you've raised, are indeed some of the items that were red flags for us, notwithstanding the fact that the total installation cost per container is sitting at about 1.75 million rand. Now, the actual project would have gone through quite an extensive process of being approved both by the department at a provincial level, but as well as by the national government's National Assessment Panel, because it is funded by the national government conditional grant. I think what is important for us and it would have, all of the documentation would have been submitted. And so that is actually part of our current internal investigation to understand, how that process actually unfolded and how it is that we found ourselves here, and to understand what that vetting of those individual cost items would have been. And I think, as I'm saying, I think really now what we need to be doing is also looking to the future. We do have 16 beneficiaries who are very disappointed with how this project has rolled out, and we need to find a way to ensure that we don't leave them hanging. So part of what we are going to be doing in reassessing the project is also trying to effectively relook the model and come up with a different operating model or costing model that actually yields benefit for the residents of Gauteng.
Because this also, you know, if you look at the price tag, I know that you've halted the second phase of the program in which a further 20 million rand would have been dispersed. But my understanding is 36 million rand has already been spent. And before I ask about, because you said some of the projects have already been closed, it hasn't delivered what it should have. And we'll talk about the assets that potentially are already there now. But was there an expected ROI? I mean, this is such a lot of money for 16 beneficiaries to set up shop and, as you said earlier, to do some potentially really good work. But was this project actually worth the... I mean, I know that you're investigating as well, so this is probably a premature question. Doesn't sound like it was a lot of spending for potentially a lower ROI.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the core deliverables of a project of this nature should be job creation and sustainable job creation in these communities. Of course, it needs to also be addressing the issue of food insecurity and ensuring that we can actually have outlets that provide healthy, safe, nutritious food to our communities in townships, informal settlements, hostels, and the likes. So there are a number of social benefits that a project like this could have if it is implemented effectively. And I think therein lies the issue, is that it hasn't been. But just going back to the first part of your question, you know, even in terms of the funds that have already been dispersed, that nothing stops us from doing a review of those funds. And we have actually engaged even with the Office of the Premier, who's given us support to say, should it need to go there, we are willing to even initiate a process to recoup funds if and when it is found that any funds were misappropriated or were not actually put to use in the intended way. So there are a number of avenues at our disposal, and none of them is out of the question at this point in time. It will definitely be subject to the outcomes of the investigation and the necessary remedial action as per the outcomes of that investigation will be taken. And we will do that without fear or favor. You know, this is what the residents of Gauteng have called on us to do. This is why I am, have been elected into this office. And we definitely have no problem with holding those responsible accountable.
Have you spoken to or asked Farmyard, which is the custodians of this project, essentially, and its owners for an explanation? Have they been interviewed?
Yeah, so we are going to be, I myself will actually be engaging with them in the next few days. However, in terms of the agreement, the service providers, as in Farmyard, report to our in-house project steering committee, which is a committee that had been established to oversee the implementation of all of our conditional assessment programs, conditional grant funded programs. So on a periodic basis, they are required to report on the progress of projects, and they did supply reports earlier on in the year. I think the last report that we have was dated July. And in that report, there would have been no immediate, reason to assume that the project is not successful. However, upon conducting our own further oversight visits, our own unannounced oversight visits, it then became apparent that, what we are seeing as the picture being painted in the reports is not necessarily what we see in reality.
What do you mean?
So as I'm saying, some of the containers, for example, are not in operation. That didn't come through in the previous report. They are actually closed down. The business people have abandoned those stalls. In other instances, the condition of some of the stalls is not what would have been expected. And as mentioned, also employment targets. We would have expected at least 48 jobs to come out of the first wave, and 48 jobs is about 3 to 4 jobs per stall, So, and we're expecting that to be full-time employees. Now, obviously, that also hasn't been the case, but there needs to there needs to be a further, more concise, assessment of this project, and that will be the basis of the discussion with the service provider when we do engage with them this week.
I guess you're not ruling out criminal charges potentially.
Nothing is ruled out, but as I'm saying, it's not for me to determine. I think we have to allow the investigation to yield whatever outcome it does. And as I'm saying, we have mechanisms available to us, if need be, if the SIU needs to be brought into this, that correspondence will obviously be forwarded to them. And forensic investigations are also not out of the question. So I think the key thing here is to get a full picture of, one, how we got here, how it is that we got to this type of a costing on a project of this nature. Where did that money go? Did it actually go to what it was supposed to go to?
Yeah.
And then number two is then to look at the actual project management and the implementation of the project to ascertain, why it is that the project has not fulfilled its stated objectives. Yeah. And as I'm saying, this is unfolding in real time. So we are on top of it.
And it's such a pity because, as you shared earlier as well, the idea was, community co-ops and subsistence farmers, they would, basically produce the food. It would be sold at these stalls back into the community, and there'd be this really beautiful ecosystem that would be created of sustainable, accessible food, one imagines, also at a very competitive rate. I want to come back to the 16 beneficiaries, because one imagines at the beginning, they applied to be part of the program, then they're approved, then they promised all of these different things. And as you say, some of them would have started operating, eventually closed down because the promises that were made didn't quite materialize further down the line. And so their hopes and their aspirations are now dashed. What's the conversation that you're having with them about how long this is going to take? Because I assume they've just been without work and without prospects over the last while.
Well, and that's exactly it. So I think as a starting point, as I've said, some of them have completely closed down. Others are operating, but operating under very challenging circumstances, not profitable, struggling with accessing good quality stock. And to the point that you made, the idea was that this would be an opportunity to create a localized retail outlet, even for, community gardens and backyard farmers to have an access point, a market access point to sell their goods. Now that hasn't happened, and we need to understand from a business model perspective whether there is still something that can be salvaged. The investment has been made, though, and so I'll say from my perspective, I believe that we need to try as best as possible to find where the inefficiencies or issues are and try and turn this project around. The nature, though, of the conditional grant and is that it is highly regulated. We receive that funding from national government, and that's why even when we had to suspend the project, I had to actually we had to correspond with national government, request a deviation of funds, request a temporary suspension of the project. But the idea is to get back on track as soon as we can resolve on some of these matters. And I equally am engaging with the beneficiaries. We will be having a series of meetings also, the first one being tomorrow, and going forward after they had actually corresponded with me. So the idea is to then work towards putting a plan together that doesn't leave them, completely in the lurch or destitute.
MEC Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, thank you very much for, sharing again